Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. What about the government employees side of this, Alicia? Civil service protections are often discussed as a barrier to any president, any executive branch, doing a real downsizing of the federal bureaucracy. And here again, Elon and Vivek are stating their ambition to challenge those in some ways, maybe to the courts if need be. And there again is an example of a place where they might be helpful in pushing President Trump and the Trump administration further than would otherwise be the case, because it is hard as an individual cabinet agency, individual cabinet head, to urge the president to pick some huge legal fight over civil service protections when you're just trying to do the day-to-day job of running the education department or the Treasury Department. And by the way, if you are in that spot of running those agencies, you have an interest in the size of your remit, the size of your budget, the number of employees that you control. And so, again, an outside force here could be helpful, I guess.
That's right. If you look at the Trump administration, many agencies actually increase their headcounts, and perhaps for some of the reasons you say, some agencies still have an interest in expanding their bailiwick. Now, Trump, at the very end of his first term, he proposed what's kind of known as a Schedule F reform that would have eliminated job protections for high-level federal employees so that they could be treated and removed like political appointees. This is important because what the Obama team and now the Biden team have been increasingly doing is what's called as burrowing. So they are essentially making political appointees or hiring them as federal government civil workers or civil service workers, even though they were actually initially tapped as political appointees. And so you really want to be able to remove these people who not only are they not necessary, they also obstruct the jobs that the Trump team and the Trump appointees are going to be trying to do. And I think that that's probably the most important point, is that you really want to remove the obstacles to actually carrying out your agenda, whether that be red tape or employees. And to the extent that the federal employees who are protected by the civil service laws are impeding that, you do want to clear out that brush. One other point is that many of these civil service laws have also impeded firing people who actually not only violate laws, but do some really bad stuff. And if you saw that at the FDIC, where you had actually internal reports about some executives at the agencies sexually harassing lower level employees and their colleagues, and you couldn't remove them because of these civil service protections. And instead, they were just transferred to other units in the country, and where they continued to engage in misconduct. And so I think this is a battle that Trump should take on.
Relocation, by the way, is another of the ideas maybe that the DOGE would suggest to deal with the civil service protection problem, relocating agencies, and then you'll have some attrition of employees as you do that. And Monet, this is occasionally floated in conservative circles. There is some logic to the idea that the Interior Department, say, should be located in the interior. The Energy Department maybe should be where the frackers are, where the oil drillers are. On the other hand, my concern there is that you would end up just spreading the dysfunction of Washington, D.C., particularly the influence of public employee unions, to new states, new locations, rather than really diminishing it. And Monet will give you the last word today.
Right. I agree with your take on this. I think that the idea of relocating the federal agencies comes from this wing of modern conservatism, which basically takes the size of government as it exists today for granted and says, as long as we're going to be spending all these trillions of dollars, we might as well disperse that wealth throughout the country, create jobs for people in the heartland, as opposed to concentrating everything in these liberal coastal cities like Washington, D.C. The problem with that in practice is that, as you said, it creates and grows a constituency for government spending and government employment in these places where ideally you would want there to be an adversarial relationship with Washington. You'd want some of these state governments to be saying, we don't want our tax dollars leaving the state and going to the Department of Agriculture or the Department of the Interior. We want to right-size government and be able to lower taxes and spur growth and jobs in our state in productive ways. So I think that it makes sense where the temptation comes from. People see these buckets of money being spent in Washington and want their own constituents to benefit. But the long-term political effect would be making a lot of the country more connected to and more dependent on federal spending.
Thank you, Monet and Alicia. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back next week with another edition of Potomac Watch.